Have you ever made a decision and wondered if it was truly yours to make? Recent breakthroughs in quantum consciousness research suggest something unsettling. The choices you think you're making might be emerging from quantum processes happening completely beyond your awareness or control. Scientists at Google's Quantum AI Lab are now proposing experiments that could fundamentally change how we understand the nature of human agency itself. Welcome back to another journey through the mysteries of consciousness and reality. I'm your guide through these quiet contemplations, and tonight we're exploring one of the most profound questions facing modern science. Whether the sense of control we feel over our thoughts, decisions, and actions is nothing more than an elaborate illusion created by quantum mechanical processes we can neither see nor influence. As you settle in, perhaps with a warm cup of tea or simply the comfort of your own curiosity, I invite you to breathe deeply and prepare to question something you've likely never questioned before. The very feeling of being in charge of your own mind. For decades, neuroscientists have studied consciousness by examining neurons, brain waves, and neural networks. They've mapped the regions associated with memory, emotion, and decision-making with impressive precision. Yet despite all this progress, something fundamental remains mysteriously absent from their equations. You. The subjective experience of being you, of feeling like there's someone home behind your eyes, of having thoughts that feel distinctly yours. This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, and it's remained stubbornly unsolved because traditional neuroscience treats the brain like a classical computer. Neurons fire, signals travel, patterns emerge, and somehow consciousness appears. But what if this entire framework is missing something crucial? What if consciousness doesn't emerge from classical neural computation at all, but from something far stranger and more unsettling? Enter quantum consciousness theory, a field that's been quietly revolutionizing our understanding of the mind. Unlike classical physics, where everything follows predictable rules, quantum mechanics reveals a reality where particles exist in multiple states simultaneously, where observation changes reality, and where distant objects can influence each other instantaneously. And increasingly, scientists are discovering that these bizarre quantum effects might not be confined to laboratory experiments. They might be happening right now inside your head. The implications are staggering. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then what we experience as free will, choice, and control might be nothing more than the subjective experience of quantum events unfolding according to probabilistic laws we cannot influence. Your sense of deciding what to have for breakfast, choosing which words to speak, or even selecting which thoughts to follow might all be the result of quantum mechanical processes that were set in motion long before you became aware of them. Take a moment to consider this possibility. As you listen to these words, notice the feeling of choosing to pay attention, of deciding whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying. That sense of agency, that feeling of being the director of your own mental experience, might be what it feels like from the inside when quantum processes in your brain collapse from multiple possibilities into a single, definite outcome. At the forefront of quantum consciousness, research stands a theory so radical, it challenges everything we think we know about the nature of mind and reality. Developed by mathematical physicist Sir Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff, the orchestrated objective reduction theory, or Orch OR, proposes that consciousness arises not from the electrical activity of neurons, but from quantum processes occurring in microscopic structures called microtubules. Imagine for a moment that inside each neuron in your brain are countless tiny tubes, hollow cylinders made of protein that serve as the cell's skeleton. These microtubules, Penrose and Hameroff suggest, are not merely structural components, but quantum computers of extraordinary sophistication. At any given moment, they exist in quantum superposition, processing multiple possibilities simultaneously until something causes them to collapse into a single, definite state. And that moment of collapse, they propose, is consciousness itself. This isn't merely speculative philosophy. Recent experimental evidence has begun supporting aspects of the theory that once seemed impossible. Japanese researchers have detected quantum vibrations in microtubules at room temperature, something that should theoretically be impossible in the warm, wet environment of the brain. Studies on anesthetics have revealed that drugs affecting consciousness specifically target these microtubular structures, disrupting what appears to be a delicate quantum state. Most remarkably, research has shown that different isotopes of anesthetic gases, which differ only in their quantum properties like nuclear spin, have different potencies in causing unconsciousness. This suggests that consciousness itself might be sensitive to quantum-level differences that classical neuroscience would consider irrelevant. But here's where the theory becomes truly unsettling for our sense of personal agency. In the Orch OR model, consciousness doesn't control quantum collapse. Instead, quantum collapse creates consciousness. Each moment of awareness, each thought, each decision you think you're making is actually the subjective experience of quantum probabilities resolving into definite outcomes according to laws embedded in the very structure of space-time itself. Penrose suggests that these quantum collapses are influenced by what he calls non-computable Platonic values, fundamental principles woven into the fabric of reality that guide how quantum possibilities resolve into classical actuality. In other words, your choices might not be determined by your reasoning, your desires, or your will, but by mathematical truths that exist independently of your conscious mind. To understand the challenge quantum consciousness theories pose to free will, we need to delve into one of the most perplexing puzzles in modern physics, the measurement problem. In quantum mechanics, particles don't have definite properties until they're observed or measured. Instead, they exist in what's called superposition, a state where all possible outcomes exist simultaneously until something forces the system to choose. This presents a profound paradox. If quantum systems remain in superposition until measured, what counts as a measurement? And if consciousness itself emerges from quantum processes, as the Orch OR theory suggests, then who or what is doing the measuring that creates our conscious experience? Some interpretations suggest that consciousness collapses quantum wave functions through the act of observation, but this creates an infinite regress. If consciousness collapses quantum states, what collapses the quantum states that create consciousness? The more we examine this puzzle, the more it appears that rather than consciousness controlling quantum processes might be controlling consciousness. Consider what happens when you make what feels like a simple choice, such as deciding whether to continue listening to this video or pause it to make a cup of tea. From your subjective perspective, you weigh the options, consider your preferences, and make a decision. But if consciousness emerges from quantum processes in your brain, then what you experience as choice might actually be the feeling of quantum superpositions in your microtubules collapsing into definite states according to probabilistic laws. The quantum possibilities for making tea or continuing to listen exist simultaneously in superposition. Your sense of deliberation might be the subjective experience of these possibilities interfering with each other, creating complex quantum interference patterns. And your final decision might simply be which possibility the laws of quantum mechanics select when the superposition inevitably collapses. As you contemplate this possibility, notice how it feels to imagine that your sense of choosing might be an illusion. Does the idea seem threatening, liberating, or simply curious? Whatever your reaction, consider that even that response might not be entirely under your control, but rather the result of quantum processes unfolding according to their own mysterious logic. If quantum consciousness theories weren't unsettling enough for our sense of free will, there's an even more radical possibility emerging from the foundations of quantum mechanics itself. Some physicists, following leads first suggested by Einstein, proposed that the apparent randomness of quantum mechanics is itself an illusion. They suggest that the universe might be superdeterministic, meaning that everything that happens, including our decisions to perform experiments and our choices about what to observe, is predetermined by hidden variables we cannot access. In a superdeterministic universe, your decision to listen to this video, your thoughts about quantum consciousness, and even your sense of surprise at these ideas would all be determined by factors established at the beginning of time. The apparent freedom you feel in considering these concepts would be nothing more than the subjective experience of a deterministic process playing out according to laws established long before you were born. This might seem like an extreme position, but it's taken seriously by respected physicists because it solves several puzzles in quantum mechanics. It eliminates the measurement problem by removing the need for wave function collapse. It explains quantum entanglement without requiring faster-than-light communication. And it provides a deterministic foundation for a theory that has always seemed uncomfortably random. But the price of this solution is steep. If superdeterminism is correct, then not only do you lack free will, but the entire scientific enterprise that discovered superdeterminism was itself predetermined. The questions scientists choose to ask, the experiments they design, and the conclusions they draw would all be the inevitable result of prior causes stretching back to the beginning of the universe. John Bell, the physicist whose theorem revealed the strange non-local properties of quantum mechanics, suggested that superdeterminism might indeed be the answer to quantum mechanics puzzles. But he also noted that in a superdeterministic world, our behaviour would be as predetermined as the behaviour of inanimate objects, running on the same behind-the-scenes clockwork that governs the motion of planets and the decay of radioactive atoms. Take a breath here and notice how your mind responds to these ideas. Do you find yourself wanting to reject superdeterminism to assert your own freedom and agency? If so, consider that this very desire to reject the idea might itself be predetermined, arising not from your autonomous choice but from quantum processes or hidden variables that were set in motion long before this moment. One of the most mysterious aspects of consciousness is its unity. Despite the fact that your brain processes vast amounts of information from different senses simultaneously, you don't experience a fragmented collection of separate sensations. Instead, you experience a unified, coherent stream of consciousness where sights, sounds, thoughts, and feelings are bound together into a single, integrated experience. This is known as the binding problem in neuroscience, and it's proven remarkably difficult to explain using classical models of brain function. How do billions of individual neurons, each processing information independently, create the seamless unity of conscious experience? Traditional neuroscience suggests that binding occurs through synchronized neural oscillations But this explanation has significant limitations. Quantum consciousness theories offer a radically different solution: quantum entanglement. In quantum mechanics, particles can become entangled, meaning their properties remain correlated regardless of the distance between them. When one entangled particle is measured, its partner instantly assumes a complementary state, even if they're separated by vast distances. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes in microtubules, as the Orch OR theory suggests, then the unity of conscious experience might arise from quantum entanglement between these microscopic structures throughout the brain. Your unified sense of self might be the subjective experience of billions of quantum systems that are entangled with each other, creating a single, coherent quantum state that extends throughout your entire neural network. This possibility has profound implications for our understanding of personal identity and control. If your sense of being a unified self arises from quantum entanglement, then that self might not be localized to any particular region of your brain. Instead, your consciousness might be a distributed quantum phenomenon that exists in the entangled relationships between countless microscopic structures. More unsettling still, if consciousness is fundamentally quantum mechanical, then it might be subject to the same strange properties that govern quantum systems. Your thoughts and experiences might exist in superposition until observed or measured. Your sense of having a continuous identity through time might be an illusion created by the collapse of quantum states that contain multiple possible histories simultaneously. Consider for a moment what this might mean for your sense of being in control of your own mind. If your thoughts exist in quantum superposition until they collapse into definite states, then what you experience as the process of thinking might be fundamentally different from what you imagine. Instead of consciously directing your thoughts, you might be experiencing the collapse of quantum possibilities into definite mental states, according to laws you cannot influence or control. The theories we've explored might seem like pure speculation, but cutting-edge experiments are beginning to test these radical ideas about consciousness and control. Google's Quantum AI Lab, led by Hartmut Neven, has proposed experiments that would literally entangle human brains with quantum computers to test whether participants report richer conscious experiences when their neural systems become part of an expanded quantum network. These expansion protocols, as they're called, would create quantum entanglements between brain structures and artificial quantum systems, potentially allowing researchers to manipulate consciousness in ways that were previously unimaginable. If successful, these experiments could provide the first direct evidence that consciousness has quantum origins, and that our sense of mental control is fundamentally illusory. Meanwhile, companies like Navanic in Vancouver are developing technologies that allow brain signals to interact directly with quantum systems. Rather than studying neurons or brain tissue directly, they're using quantum algorithms to simulate consciousness by programming artificial systems to send sensory data to quantum computers, which then return results that guide subsequent actions. These developments suggest that we may be on the verge of discoveries that will fundamentally transform our understanding of human nature. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that we cannot directly control, then our entire legal, ethical, and social framework based on the assumption of free will may need to be reconsidered. As you listen to these possibilities, take a moment to notice your own internal responses. Do you feel resistance to the idea that your control might be illusory? Do you find yourself searching for ways to preserve your sense of agency? Whatever you're experiencing, consider that these very responses might be arising from quantum processes that are unfolding according to their own logic, independent of what you might consciously prefer to believe. The implications extend far beyond philosophy and neuroscience. If our decisions are the result of quantum processes or superdeterministic evolution, how do we think about moral responsibility? How do we justify praise and blame, punishment and reward if people's actions are the inevitable result of quantum mechanical processes they cannot control? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're becoming increasingly urgent as our understanding of consciousness deepens. The comfortable assumption that we are the authors of our own thoughts and the directors of our own actions is being challenged by discoveries that suggest something far stranger and more humbling about the nature of human experience. We're standing at the threshold of a new understanding of consciousness, one that may require us to completely reconceptualize what it means to be human. In our next exploration, we'll delve deeper into the specific mechanisms by which quantum processes might create the illusion of control, and examine what this means for how we navigate a world where free will itself might be the ultimate quantum illusion. But before we continue, if you found this exploration of quantum consciousness fascinating, you might be intrigued by our investigation into how the James Webb Space Telescope detected something that appears to be older than the Big Bang itself, challenging our most fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality. The discovery breaks our current understanding of physics in ways that echo the quantum consciousness theories we've been exploring, suggesting that reality at every scale may be far stranger than we've ever imagined. The most unsettling discovery emerging from quantum consciousness research isn't just that your thoughts might arise from quantum processes you can't control. It's that scientists are becoming increasingly able to predict your decisions before you're consciously aware of making them. This creates a paradox that strikes at the very heart of human experience. If your choices can be predicted by observing quantum states in your brain, then in what sense are they truly your choices at all? Recent experiments have shown that by monitoring specific patterns of brain activity, researchers can predict with remarkable accuracy what decision a person will make up to several seconds before the person reports being aware of their choice. These findings suggest that what we experience as the moment of decision might actually be the moment when quantum processes that have already determined the outcome finally rise to the level of conscious awareness. Consider this carefully. As you listen to these words, you might feel yourself deciding whether to continue listening or to pause and reflect. But if quantum consciousness theories are correct, that decision might already be determined by quantum processes that began unfolding in your microtubules before you became consciously aware of any choice at all. Your experience of deliberation might be nothing more than the subjective feeling of quantum possibilities collapsing into a predetermined outcome. This doesn't necessarily mean your decisions are random or meaningless. Instead, it suggests they might be the result of incredibly complex quantum computations happening at a level far below conscious awareness. Your brain might be processing vast amounts of information through quantum parallelism, exploring countless possible responses simultaneously before quantum decoherence forces a single outcome into conscious experience. Take a moment to notice how this possibility affects you. Do you feel a sense of unease, curiosity, or perhaps relief at the idea that the burden of choice might not rest entirely on your conscious mind? Whatever you're experiencing right now, consider that even this response might be emerging from quantum processes that are beyond your direct control, yet intimately connected to who you are at the deepest level. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence for quantum effects in consciousness comes from studying anesthesia. When anesthetic gases render someone unconscious, they don't simply turn off the brain like a light switch. Instead, they seem to disrupt something far more subtle and specific: the delicate quantum coherence that might be necessary for conscious experience to emerge. What makes this particularly fascinating is that anesthetic potency correlates precisely with something called lipid solubility. But recent research suggests this might be masking a deeper truth. The anesthetics appear to bind to aromatic amino acid rings in brain proteins through quantum level forces, disrupting what some researchers believe are terahertz frequency oscillations in microtubules. Imagine consciousness as a vast quantum orchestra with billions of microtubules vibrating in precise harmonies that span multiple frequency ranges, from terahertz down to the familiar brainwaves measured by EEG. Anesthetics might work by dampening these quantum oscillations, like placing a heavy blanket over a symphony orchestra. The music doesn't stop entirely, but the delicate interplay that creates the full experience becomes muffled and incoherent. This suggests something profound about the nature of conscious control. If consciousness depends on maintaining quantum coherence across vast networks of microtubules, then our sense of being in charge of our own minds might be contingent on physical processes that are extraordinarily fragile and sensitive to disruption. A slight change in temperature, the presence of certain molecules, or even subtle electromagnetic fields might be capable of altering the quantum states that give rise to conscious experience. Recent experiments have detected what appear to be quantum effects in living brain tissue at body temperature, something that many physicists once thought impossible. The warm, wet environment of the brain should destroy quantum coherence almost instantly, yet somehow these delicate quantum states persist long enough to potentially influence neural processing. As you contemplate these ideas, you might find yourself becoming more aware of the physical sensations in your own body, the warmth of your skin, the rhythm of your breathing, the gentle pressure of wherever you're resting. If quantum consciousness theories are correct, these simple sensations might be arising from quantum processes that are operating right at the edge of what's physically possible, maintaining coherence in an environment that should destroy it almost instantly. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of consciousness is how it weaves together disparate elements into a unified whole. Right now, as you listen, you're not experiencing separate streams of auditory information, visual input, bodily sensations, and internal thoughts. Instead, all of these elements are bound together into a single, coherent experience of this moment. Classical neuroscience has struggled to explain this binding problem. How do billions of neurons, each processing information independently and at different speeds, create the seamless unity of conscious experience? Traditional theories suggest that synchronized neural oscillations somehow bind different brain regions together, but this explanation has never been entirely satisfying. Quantum consciousness theories offer a radically different solution: quantum entanglement. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes in microtubules throughout the brain, then the unity of experience might arise from quantum entanglement between these microscopic structures. Your sense of being a unified self might be the subjective experience of a vast quantum system in which countless components are entangled with each other. This possibility is both beautiful and unsettling. If your unified sense of self arises from quantum entanglement, then your identity might not be localized to any particular region of your brain. Instead, your consciousness might be a distributed quantum phenomenon that exists in the entangled relationships between countless microscopic structures throughout your neural network. More remarkably still, quantum entanglement displays what Einstein called spooky action at a distance. Entangled particles maintain their correlation instantaneously, regardless of the distance between them. If consciousness involves quantum entanglement within the brain, then different aspects of your experience might be connected in ways that transcend the usual limitations of space and time within neural processing. Consider what this might mean for your sense of personal control. If your thoughts and experiences exist as entangled quantum states, then the boundary between different aspects of your mental life might be far more fluid than you imagine. The thought you believe you're consciously directing might be instantaneously correlated with unconscious processes throughout your brain, creating a web of influence that operates below the threshold of awareness. Breathe deeply for a moment and notice how even this simple instruction seems to coordinate multiple aspects of your experience simultaneously. Your attention shifts, your body responds, your awareness of the present moment sharpens. If quantum consciousness theories are correct, this coordination might be happening through quantum entanglement that binds together neural processes across your entire brain in ways that feel effortless and automatic, yet might be beyond your conscious control. Quantum mechanics reveals something deeply strange about the nature of reality. The act of observation appears to play a fundamental role in determining what actually happens. This observer effect has puzzled physicists for nearly a century, but it takes on even more mysterious dimensions when we consider that the observers themselves might be quantum systems. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes in the brain, then we face a profound recursive puzzle. Quantum systems require observation to collapse from superposition into definite states. But if consciousness itself is a quantum phenomenon, then what observes the quantum processes that create consciousness? We seem to be caught in an infinite loop where quantum processes create observers who observe quantum processes that create observers. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness doesn't collapse quantum wave functions through observation, but rather that quantum collapse creates consciousness. Each moment of awareness might be the subjective experience of quantum superpositions, resolving into definite states according to fundamental laws embedded in the structure of space-time itself. This inversion has profound implications for our sense of agency. Instead of consciousness controlling quantum processes through observation, quantum processes might be controlling consciousness through collapse. What you experience as making a decision might actually be the feeling of quantum possibilities resolving into a single outcome according to principles you cannot influence or understand. The mathematician and physicist Roger Penrose has suggested that these quantum collapses are influenced by what he calls non-computable Platonic values, mathematical truths that exist independently of physical reality, but somehow guide how quantum possibilities resolve into classical outcomes. If this is correct, then your choices might not be determined by your reasoning, desires, or will, but by abstract mathematical principles that transcend human understanding. As you listen to these ideas, notice the strange loop of awareness that's occurring. You're using consciousness to contemplate the nature of consciousness, employing the very phenomenon you're trying to understand as the tool for understanding it. This recursive quality might not be a limitation of our investigation, but rather a clue to something fundamental about the nature of reality itself. Even if we set aside the most radical implications of quantum consciousness theories, we're still left with a troubling question. What does it mean to have free will in a probabilistic universe? Quantum mechanics tells us that even if the future isn't completely determined, it's still constrained by precise probabilistic laws that govern how likely different outcomes are to occur. If your decisions arise from quantum processes in your brain, then your choices might not be random, but they might still be governed by probability distributions that you cannot consciously influence. Your sense of freely choosing between options might be the subjective experience of quantum mechanical probabilities playing out according to laws that were established long before you were born. This creates a subtle but profound challenge to free will. Even if your choices aren't completely determined, if the probability of making different choices is fixed by physical laws, then in what sense are those choices truly free? You might have the subjective experience of weighing options and making decisions, but if physics can predict the statistical distribution of your choices with perfect accuracy, then your freedom might be more limited than you imagine. Consider how this applies to the choices you make throughout a typical day. Your decision to have coffee or tea, to take one route or another, to speak or remain silent in a conversation. From your perspective, these feel like free choices based on your preferences, mood, and circumstances. But if quantum consciousness theories are correct, each of these decisions might be the result of quantum processes that unfold according to probabilistic laws you cannot access or influence. The physicist and philosopher David Bohm suggested that what we experience as free will might be similar to what happens when we watch a movie. The characters on screen appear to be making choices and taking actions, but everything that happens is actually the result of predetermined information encoded in the film. Similarly, your sense of making choices might be the subjective experience of information that's already encoded in the quantum structure of reality itself. Take a breath here and notice how your attention moves as you listen to these ideas. Does it feel like you're consciously directing your focus, or does your awareness seem to shift naturally from concept to concept according to some internal logic you don't fully control? If you pay close attention to the quality of your own mental experience, you might begin to notice that the boundary between conscious control and automatic process is far less clear than it usually seems. If consciousness does emerge from quantum processes in brain microtubules, this could revolutionize how we understand and treat mental health conditions. Traditional psychiatric medications target neurotransmitter systems, but quantum consciousness theories suggest that the deepest sources of mental distress might be disruptions in quantum coherence that occur at much more fundamental levels. Researchers are already exploring therapeutic applications of these ideas. Transcranial ultrasound, which can deliver precisely targeted vibrations to specific brain regions, might be able to influence microtubule resonances in ways that restore healthy quantum coherence patterns. Instead of chemically altering neurotransmitter levels, future treatments might work by fine-tuning the quantum orchestration that gives rise to conscious experience itself. This approach could be particularly relevant for understanding conditions like depression, anxiety, and various forms of psychosis. If these conditions involve disruptions in the quantum processes that bind conscious experience together, then treatments that restore quantum coherence might be more effective than current approaches that focus solely on classical neural mechanisms. Some researchers have even suggested that practices like meditation and mindfulness might work by helping to maintain or restore quantum coherence in brain microtubules. The sense of expanded awareness and unified consciousness that many people report during deep meditative states might reflect changes in quantum entanglement patterns that bind different aspects of experience together more harmoniously. However, it's crucial to emphasize that these ideas remain highly speculative, and no scientific consensus exists about the role of quantum processes in mental health. The research is still in its earliest stages, and many neuroscientists remain skeptical that quantum effects play any significant role in brain function, let alone in consciousness or mental illness. As you consider these possibilities, you might find yourself wondering about your own mental states and experiences. Have you ever noticed moments when your sense of self feels more unified or fragmented than usual? If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, these subtle variations in self-experience might reflect changes in the quantum coherence patterns that underlie consciousness itself. One of the most intriguing questions raised by quantum consciousness theories is how evolution could have shaped quantum processes to create the illusion of control, even if genuine free will doesn't exist. If our sense of agency is indeed an illusion created by quantum processes we cannot influence, why would natural selection have favoured brains that generate this particular kind of illusion? The answer might lie in the adaptive value of believing we have control, even if that belief is ultimately false. Organisms that behave as if their actions matter are more likely to survive and reproduce than those that behave as if their actions are meaningless. The subjective experience of choice and control might serve as a powerful motivational system that encourages adaptive behaviour, regardless of whether genuine free will exists. This suggests that consciousness might have evolved not as a mechanism for actually controlling behaviour, but as a sophisticated self-monitoring system that creates the experience of control, while behaviour is actually determined by quantum processes operating below the threshold of awareness. Your sense of making decisions might be similar to the dashboard in a car, providing useful information about what's happening without actually controlling the engine. From this perspective, the feeling of being in control serves a crucial function, even if it's ultimately illusory. It motivates you to gather information, consider options, and take actions that increase your chances of survival and success. The fact that these processes might ultimately be governed by quantum mechanical laws doesn't make them any less important for navigating the challenges of existence. This evolutionary perspective also helps explain why the illusion of control is so compelling and difficult to shake off, even when presented with evidence that it might be false. We're not just intellectually committed to the idea of free will. We're biologically programmed to experience agency as a fundamental aspect of being conscious. Questioning this experience feels threatening, not just to our philosophical worldview, but to our basic sense of what it means to be human. Notice how even as you consider these ideas, part of you likely maintains the feeling that you're actively thinking about them, weighing their implications and forming your own opinions. This persistent sense of mental agency might be one of evolution's most sophisticated achievements, a quantum-based illusion, so convincing that it continues to operate even when we understand it as an illusion. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes involving countless microscopic components, this raises fascinating questions about the nature of personal identity and decision-making. Instead of imagining consciousness as a unified command center that issues orders to the rest of the brain, we might need to think of it as more like a democracy of quantum particles, each contributing to outcomes in ways that collectively create the experience of unified choice. In this view, what you experience as making a decision might be the subjective feeling of countless quantum processes reaching a kind of consensus through mechanisms we don't yet understand. Your sense of internal debate and deliberation might reflect genuine quantum superposition, with different possibilities coexisting until some form of quantum measurement or decoherence forces a resolution. This democratic model of consciousness could help explain why decision-making often feels complex and uncertain. If your choices emerge from the collective behavior of vast numbers of quantum systems, then the process naturally involves weighing multiple factors and possibilities simultaneously. The difficulty you sometimes experience in making decisions might reflect genuine quantum uncertainty rather than simple indecisiveness. It also suggests that personal growth and change might occur through gradual shifts in the quantum processes that give rise to conscious experience. Instead of consciously deciding to become a different kind of person, you might influence the quantum democracy of your consciousness through practices, experiences, and environmental changes that gradually alter how quantum possibilities resolve into conscious experiences. The implications extend to how we think about personal responsibility and self-improvement. If your behavior emerges from quantum processes you cannot directly control, but those processes can be influenced by factors like meditation, therapy, education, and life experiences, then personal conditions that favor development becomes a matter of creating beneficial quantum outcomes rather than forcing change through conscious willpower alone. As you reflect on these ideas, consider your own experience of personal change over time. Have you noticed that significant shifts in your patterns of thinking and behaving often seem to happen gradually and somewhat mysteriously, rather than through sudden conscious decisions? This might reflect the slow evolution of quantum processes that operate below the threshold of awareness, but ultimately shape who you are. Perhaps the most experimentally exciting development in quantum consciousness research involves proposals to directly test whether human consciousness has quantum origins. Google's Quantum AI Lab has outlined protocols that would entangle human brains with quantum computers to see if participants report enhanced conscious experiences when their neural systems become part of expanded quantum networks. These expansion experiments represent a new frontier in consciousness research, potentially providing the first direct evidence that awareness emerges from quantum processes. If successful, they could demonstrate that consciousness can be enhanced by increasing the quantum complexity of the systems that generate it, supporting theories that link awareness to quantum information processing. The experimental design involves creating quantum entanglement between brain structures and artificial quantum systems, potentially allowing researchers to manipulate aspects of consciousness that have never been accessible to scientific investigation. Participants might experience forms of awareness that extend beyond the normal boundaries of individual minds, offering unprecedented insights into the quantum nature of conscious experience. However, these experiments also raise profound ethical and philosophical questions. If consciousness can be enhanced through quantum entanglement with artificial systems, what are the implications for human identity and autonomy? If our sense of self can be expanded or altered by connecting our brains to quantum computers, then what defines the boundaries of individual consciousness? Companies like Navanic are developing related technologies that allow brain signals to interact directly with quantum systems, creating hybrid biological quantum networks that might exhibit forms of awareness that transcend traditional categories of natural and artificial intelligence. These developments suggest we may be approaching a future where the boundaries between human and machine consciousness become increasingly blurred. As you contemplate these possibilities, consider how they might affect your understanding of your own mind. If consciousness can be expanded through quantum entanglement, then your current awareness might represent just one possible configuration of quantum processes that could give rise to very different forms of experience under different conditions. The self you identify with might be far more fluid and context-dependent than you've ever imagined. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, they will force us to completely reconceptualize fundamental concepts like moral responsibility, justice, and personal accountability. If people's actions emerge from quantum processes they cannot consciously control, how do we justify systems of praise and blame, punishment and reward that assumes individuals are responsible for their choices? This doesn't necessarily mean that moral responsibility disappears entirely, but it might need to be understood in radically different terms. Instead of holding people accountable for consciously chosen actions, we might need to focus on creating conditions that favor beneficial quantum outcomes while discouraging harmful ones. Justice might become more about shaping the quantum processes that give rise to behavior rather than punishing individuals for choices they may not have genuinely made. Some philosophers argue that even if free will is an illusion, the experience of moral responsibility serves important social functions that justify maintaining it regardless of its ultimate truth. The belief that people are responsible for their actions encourages better behavior and creates social cohesion, even if that belief is based on a fundamental misunderstanding of how consciousness works. Others suggest that quantum consciousness theories might actually enhance rather than diminish moral responsibility. If our actions emerge from quantum processes that can be influenced by factors like education, therapy, meditation, and life experiences, then we might bear responsibility not for our individual choices, but for creating conditions that favor beneficial quantum outcomes in ourselves and others. The legal system would face particularly complex challenges in adapting to quantum consciousness theories. How do we determine guilt or innocence if actions emerge from quantum processes that operate below conscious awareness? How do we design rehabilitation programs that target quantum rather than classical mechanisms of behavior change? These questions don't have easy answers, but they're becoming increasingly urgent as our understanding of consciousness deepens. The comfortable assumptions that underlie our entire social and legal framework may need to be reconsidered in light of discoveries about the quantum nature of mind and choice. Take a moment to consider how these ideas might apply to your own moral intuitions. When you feel proud of an accomplishment or guilty about a mistake, how does it change your experience to imagine that those actions might have emerged from quantum processes beyond your conscious control? Does this perspective feel liberating, troubling, or simply curious? As we stand on the threshold of potentially revolutionary discoveries about the nature of consciousness and control, we're forced to confront the possibility that everything we thought we knew about human agency might need to be reconsidered. The quantum realm that once seemed confined to physics laboratories might actually be the hidden foundation of our most intimate experiences of choice, identity, and moral responsibility. As we venture deeper into the labyrinth of quantum consciousness, we encounter perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all: the possibility that the private sanctuary of your inner world might not be as private as you imagine. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that can be measured, predicted, and potentially manipulated, then the thoughts you consider most intimately yours might be accessible to technologies we're only beginning to develop. Recent advances in brain-computer interfaces have already demonstrated that certain intentions can be decoded from neural activity before people are consciously aware of their decisions. But if quantum consciousness theories prove correct, this is just the beginning. Future technologies might be able to read quantum states in microtubules, potentially accessing the deepest levels of mental process long before they emerge into conscious awareness. Imagine a world where your quantum mental states can be monitored in real time, where the collapse of superpositions in your microtubules can be detected and analysed to predict not just what you'll decide, but what you'll think and feel. The boundary between private inner experience and observable physical process might dissolve entirely, leaving us in a reality where mental privacy is as obsolete as sending messages by horseback. This possibility raises profound questions about the nature of personal identity and individual autonomy. If your thoughts can be read from quantum processes you cannot control, then what remains uniquely yours? If your future mental states can be predicted from current quantum configurations in your brain, then in what sense do you own your own mind? Take a moment to notice the quality of your own thoughts right now. The ideas flowing through your awareness, the subtle shifts in attention, the background hum of mental activity that accompanies your listening. If quantum consciousness theories are correct, all of this might be arising from measurable quantum processes that could, in principle, be detected and decoded by sufficiently advanced technology. The implications extend far beyond privacy concerns. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that follow predictable laws, then the entire notion of individual mental autonomy might need to be reconsidered. Your sense of having private thoughts, secret desires, and hidden motivations might be the last vestige of a pre-quantum understanding of mind that science is gradually revealing to be illusory. One of the most fascinating aspects of quantum consciousness theories is how they might explain the complex, often contradictory nature of human decision-making. Traditional models of choice assume a unified decision-maker weighing options and selecting outcomes. But if consciousness emerges from quantum processes involving countless microscopic components, decision-making might be more like a vast democracy of quantum particles reaching consensus through mechanisms we barely understand. Consider how decisions actually feel from the inside. Rarely do you experience a clean, linear process of evaluating options and choosing. Instead, decision-making often involves competing impulses, changing preferences, moments of uncertainty, and outcomes that sometimes surprise even you. This complexity might reflect genuine quantum superposition, with different possibilities coexisting in your microtubules until decoherence forces a resolution. In this quantum democracy model, what you experience as internal conflict might be the subjective feeling of different quantum possibilities interfering with each other. Your sense of weighing pros and cons might reflect actual quantum computation happening below conscious awareness, with countless microscopic processes contributing to outcomes that eventually emerge into conscious experience as seemingly unified decisions. This perspective could revolutionize how we understand personal change and growth. Instead of imagining self-improvement as a matter of conscious willpower overcoming bad habits, we might need to think of it as gradually influencing the quantum processes that give rise to behavior, creating conditions that favor beneficial quantum outcomes through practices like meditation, therapy, or environmental changes might be more effective than trying to force change through conscious effort alone. The quantum democracy model also helps explain why authentic change often feels organic rather than forced. When transformation occurs naturally, it might reflect genuine shifts in the quantum processes underlying consciousness rather than temporary suppression of unwanted patterns through willpower. The difference between sustainable and unsustainable change might be whether it emerges from quantum-level shifts or remains confined to conscious mental effort. As you reflect on your own experience of decision-making, notice how choices actually unfold in your awareness. Do they feel like calculations, or do they often conscious emerge from some deeper process that presents its conclusions to consciousness after the real work is already done? This distinction might reveal something fundamental about the relationship between quantum processes and conscious experience. If consciousness does emerge from quantum processes in microtubules, this suggests that awareness itself has a complex architecture that operates across multiple scales simultaneously. From the quantum level of individual microtubule oscillations to the classical level of neural networks, consciousness might be organized as a hierarchy of information processing systems that create the unified experience of being you. At the quantum level, microtubules throughout your brain might be processing information through superposition and entanglement, exploring vast possibilities in parallel before collapsing into definite states. These quantum computations might then influence classical neural processes, which in turn shape the thoughts, feelings, and perceptions that enter conscious awareness. This hierarchical model suggests that consciousness might be far more complex and sophisticated than we currently understand. What you experience as a simple thought or feeling might be the culmination of quantum processes involving billions of microscopic components, each contributing to outcomes that collectively create the rich texture of conscious experience. The architecture of awareness might also explain why consciousness seems to have both unified and fragmented aspects. Your sense of being a single, continuous self coexists with the obvious fact that your mind can hold multiple, sometimes contradictory thoughts and feelings simultaneously. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that can exist in superposition, then this apparent paradox might reflect the fundamental nature of quantum reality itself. Recent research has begun mapping what researchers call the neural correlates of consciousness, specific patterns of brain activity that correspond to different aspects of conscious experience. But if quantum consciousness theories are correct, these neural correlates might be just the classical tip of a quantum iceberg, with the real action happening at scales far below what current neuroscience can observe. The possibility that consciousness has quantum foundations also raises intriguing questions about the relationships between individual awareness and the broader quantum field that some theories suggest underlies all of reality. If your consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then you might be more connected to the fundamental structure of the universe than you ever imagined, with your awareness representing a localized concentration of quantum information processing rather than an isolated phenomenon. Breathe gently for a moment and notice the seamless way your awareness moves between different aspects of experience. The sound of these words, the feeling of your body, the thoughts that arise and pass away. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, this effortless coordination might reflect quantum entanglement operating across vast networks of microtubules, binding different aspects of experience into the unified stream of consciousness you call your life. Perhaps the most philosophically challenging aspect of quantum consciousness theories is how they complicate rather than resolve questions about free will. While quantum mechanics introduces genuine indeterminacy into physical processes, This randomness doesn't necessarily create the kind of freedom that most people associate with free will. Random events aren't freely chosen events, and if your decisions are the result of quantum processes you cannot influence, then you might be no more free than if your choices were completely determined by classical physical laws. Some interpretations suggest that quantum indeterminacy creates space for free will by breaking the causal chains that would otherwise determine all future events. If quantum collapse is genuinely random, then the future might be open in ways that allow for authentic choice and genuine agency. But this argument faces a crucial challenge. Random events aren't chosen events, and indeterminacy alone doesn't create the kind of purposeful, reason-responsive agency that free will seems to require. Other approaches suggest that free will might emerge from quantum processes, not through randomness, but through what some theorists call quantum creativity. If consciousness can influence how quantum superpositions collapse into definite states, then you might have a kind of participatory role in determining outcomes without having complete control over them. Your choices might be neither random nor determined, but genuinely creative acts that help shape how quantum possibilities resolve into classical realities. This participatory view of quantum free will suggests a middle path between complete determinism and pure randomness. You might not have absolute control over your choices, but you might have genuine influence over how quantum processes unfold in your brain. Your consciousness might be both shaped by and shaping the quantum processes from which it emerges, creating a kind of circular causality that transcends simple notions of control and determination. However, it's crucial to emphasize that no scientific consensus exists about whether consciousness can influence quantum processes, and many physicists remain skeptical that quantum effects play any significant role in decision-making or free will. These ideas remain highly speculative, representing philosophical interpretations of quantum mechanics rather than established scientific facts. As you contemplate these possibilities, notice your own relationship to choice and control. When you make decisions, do they feel completely determined by prior causes, genuinely random, or something more subtle and complex? Your subjective experience of agency might offer clues about the nature of quantum processes in consciousness, even if we cannot yet measure those processes directly. One of the most puzzling aspects of quantum mechanics is the role that observation plays in determining physical reality. In quantum systems, particles don't seem to have definite properties until they're measured, existing instead in superposition states that contain all possible outcomes simultaneously. But this creates a profound puzzle when we consider that observers themselves might be quantum systems subject to the same rules. If your consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then what happens when you observe your own mental states? When you become aware of a thought or feeling, are you collapsing quantum superpositions in your own brain? And if so, what observes the quantum processes that create the observer? This recursive puzzle highlights fundamental mysteries about the relationship between consciousness and physical reality that remain unresolved. Some interpretations suggest that consciousness and quantum measurement might be two aspects of the same phenomenon. The moment of awareness might be identical to the collapse of quantum superposition, with subjective experience emerging whenever quantum possibilities resolve into definite outcomes. In this view, consciousness doesn't cause measurement. Consciousness is measurement, at least from the subjective perspective of the quantum system undergoing collapse. This possibility has profound implications for understanding the nature of self-awareness. When you observe your own thoughts and feelings, you might be participating in the same fundamental process that determines the behavior of quantum systems throughout the universe. Your capacity for self-reflection might represent a localized version of the observer effect that plays such a crucial role in quantum mechanics. The mirror-like quality of quantum measurement also suggests that consciousness might be more fundamental to physical reality than we typically assume. If observation plays a crucial role in determining what actually happens in quantum systems, and if consciousness is inherently observational, then awareness might be woven into the basic structure of reality rather than being a late addition that emerged through biological evolution. However, these ideas remain highly speculative and controversial within the scientific community. Many physicists argue that quantum measurement can be explained without invoking consciousness, and that the apparent role of observation in quantum mechanics reflects technical details about how measuring instruments work, rather than fundamental facts about the nature of reality. Take a moment to notice the strange loop of awareness that occurs as you contemplate these ideas. You're using consciousness to examine consciousness, employing the very phenomenon you're trying to understand as the instrument of understanding. This recursive quality might not be a limitation of our investigation, but rather a clue to something essential about the relationship between mind and reality. If consciousness does emerge from quantum processes, this raises fascinating questions about how individual minds relate to each other and to the broader environment. Traditional neuroscience treats consciousness as isolated phenomena confined to individual brains, but quantum consciousness theories suggest possibilities for connection and interaction that transcend the usual boundaries of personal identity. Quantum entanglement, the phenomenon where particles remain correlated regardless of distance, might create subtle connections between conscious minds that operate below the threshold of awareness. While there's no scientific evidence for direct mind-to-mind quantum entanglement, some researchers have speculated about whether quantum processes in different brains might occasionally become correlated through mechanisms we don't yet understand. Even without direct quantum connections between minds, the quantum nature of consciousness might create a more interconnected reality than we typically imagine. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that are sensitive to subtle environmental influences, then factors like electromagnetic fields, quantum fluctuations in the vacuum, or even cosmic radiation might subtly influence the quantum states that give rise to conscious experience. This ecological view of consciousness suggests that your awareness might be more responsive to environmental factors than you realize. Changes in location, time of day, weather patterns, or even astronomical events might influence the quantum processes underlying consciousness, feelings, and decision-making in ways that affect your thoughts without your conscious awareness. Some researchers have investigated whether practices like meditation might work partly by helping individuals become more sensitive to these subtle environmental influences on consciousness. The expanded awareness that many people report during contemplative practices might reflect increased sensitivity to the quantum ecology in which consciousness is embedded. The possibility that consciousness exists within a quantum ecology also raises questions about collective aspects of awareness. If individual minds are embedded within broader quantum fields, then group consciousness, cultural phenomena, and social dynamics might have quantum dimensions that we're only beginning to explore. Consider how your own mental states seem to fluctuate in response to factors you can't always identify. Sometimes you feel more creative, focused, or emotionally balanced without any obvious reason. If consciousness has quantum foundations, these variations might reflect changes in the subtle quantum environment that influences the processes underlying awareness. As you listen to these ideas, you might find yourself more aware of the context in which your consciousness is embedded, the time of day, the space you're occupying, the quality of light, the sounds around you. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, all of these factors might be subtly influencing the quantum processes that give rise to your current experience. One of the most intriguing questions raised by quantum consciousness theories is how evolution could have shaped quantum processes to create the sophisticated forms of awareness we observe in complex organisms. If consciousness does emerge from quantum effects in microtubules, then natural selection must have somehow optimized these quantum processes over millions of years of evolutionary development. This suggests that consciousness might not be an accidental byproduct of brain complexity, but rather a fundamental feature that evolution has been refining since the earliest forms of life. Simple organisms might possess rudimentary forms of quantum consciousness that became more sophisticated as nervous systems evolved greater complexity and integration. The evolutionary perspective also helps explain why consciousness seems so perfectly adapted for navigating the challenges of survival and reproduction. If awareness emerges from quantum processes that have been shaped by natural selection, then these processes must have proven highly effective for gathering information, making decisions, and coordinating behavior in ways that enhance fitness. Interestingly, the quantum nature of consciousness might have allowed evolution to explore possibilities that would be impossible with purely classical neural processes. Quantum parallelism might enable brains to consider multiple options simultaneously, while quantum entanglement might allow for rapid coordination between different brain regions. These quantum advantages might explain why consciousness evolved despite the significant energetic costs of maintaining complex nervous systems. The evolutionary development of consciousness might also explain why the experience of free will is so compelling, even if it's ultimately illusory. Organisms that behave as if their choices matter are more likely to survive and reproduce than those that behave as if their actions are meaningless. The subjective experience of agency might be evolution's way of motivating adaptive behavior, regardless of whether genuine free will exists. Recent research has begun investigating whether quantum effects might be present in simpler organisms, potentially revealing the evolutionary origins of consciousness. Studies of photosynthesis have revealed quantum effects that persist in warm, noisy biological environments, suggesting that life has evolved mechanisms for protecting and utilizing quantum processes in ways that might be relevant to consciousness. As you contemplate the evolutionary history of awareness, consider that the consciousness you're experiencing right now might represent the culmination of billions of years of quantum evolution. The thoughts arising in your mind, the quality of your attention, the sense of being present in this moment might all be expressions of quantum processes that have been refined through countless generations of natural selection. As we stand at the threshold of potentially revolutionary discoveries about consciousness and quantum mechanics, it's worth considering what the future might hold for our understanding of mind and reality. The experiments being proposed by researchers like those at Google's Quantum AI Lab could provide the first direct evidence that consciousness has quantum origins, fundamentally transforming how we understand human nature. If these experiments succeed in demonstrating quantum effects in consciousness, the implications would extend far beyond neuroscience and psychology. Our entire conception of what it means to be human might need to be reconsidered in light of evidence that awareness emerges from quantum processes we cannot directly control or influence. The development of brain-quantum computer interfaces could create forms of hybrid consciousness that transcend traditional boundaries between human and artificial intelligence. These technologies might allow for enhanced cognitive abilities, expanded awareness, or even forms of consciousness that extend beyond individual brains to encompass distributed quantum networks. However, such developments would also raise profound ethical questions about identity, autonomy, and human dignity. If consciousness can be enhanced or altered through quantum technologies, then fundamental questions about the nature of personal identity and individual rights would need to be addressed. The possibility of manipulating the quantum processes underlying consciousness could create unprecedented opportunities for both healing and harm. Future research might also reveal whether quantum consciousness theories can help explain currently mysterious phenomena like near-death experiences, altered states of consciousness, or the effects of altered neurochemical states on awareness. If consciousness does have quantum foundations, these unusual states might reflect changes in quantum coherence patterns that create different forms of conscious experience. The therapeutic applications of quantum consciousness research could revolutionize mental health treatment. Instead of focusing solely on neurotransmitter systems, future therapies might target the quantum processes that give rise to consciousness itself, potentially offering more effective treatments for conditions like depression, anxiety, and various forms of psychosis. As you imagine these future possibilities, consider how they might affect your own understanding of consciousness and identity. If science proves that awareness emerges from quantum processes, how would this change your sense of who you are and what it means to be conscious? Would you be willing to enhance your consciousness through quantum technologies? Or would you prefer to maintain the natural boundaries of individual awareness? Perhaps the most profound irony of quantum consciousness research is that the more we learn about the nature of awareness, the more mysterious it becomes. Each discovery seems to reveal new layers of complexity and raise deeper questions about the relationship between mind and reality. The closer we look at consciousness, the more it seems to recede into quantum uncertainty and philosophical paradox. This elusiveness might not be a temporary limitation of our current understanding, but rather a fundamental feature of consciousness itself. If awareness emerges from quantum processes that are inherently uncertain and probabilistic, then complete knowledge of consciousness might be impossible in principle. The act of trying to understand consciousness might necessarily change the very phenomenon we're trying to study. The paradox extends to the relationship between the observer and the observed in consciousness research. When scientists study consciousness, they're using consciousness to investigate consciousness, creating recursive loops that complicate any attempt to achieve objective understanding. The tools of investigation are identical to the phenomenon being investigated, making consciousness perhaps the most challenging subject in all of science. Yet this paradox might also be a source of insight rather than merely an obstacle. The fact that consciousness can contemplate itself might reveal something fundamental about the nature of reality. If the universe has evolved quantum processes capable of self-awareness, then consciousness might represent a fundamental feature of physical reality rather than an accidental byproduct of biological complexity. Some philosophers and scientists have suggested that consciousness might be irreducible to purely physical processes, not because it involves non-physical substances, but because it represents a fundamental aspect of reality that cannot be fully captured by external observation. Just as we cannot step outside the universe to observe it objectively, we might not be able to step outside consciousness to understand it completely. This limitation doesn't diminish the value of consciousness research, but it does suggest that our investigation of awareness might always retain an element of mystery and wonder. The deepest truths about consciousness might be accessible only through direct experience rather than external measurement, making subjective exploration as important as objective research. As you reflect on the paradox of knowing consciousness, notice the strange situation you find yourself in. You are consciousness investigating consciousness, awareness studying awareness. This recursive quality isn't a flaw in the investigation, but perhaps its most essential feature. The fact that consciousness can contemplate itself might be of all. In the end, quantum consciousness theories force us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of selfhood and personal identity. If your sense of being a unified, continuous self emerges from quantum processes that exist in superposition until observed, then the boundaries of your identity might be far more fluid and context-dependent than you've ever imagined. The self you identify with might be more like a pattern in quantum information than a fixed entity persisting through time. Your memories, personality traits, and sense of continuity might all arise from quantum processes that maintain certain patterns while constantly changing in subtle ways. You might be more like a river than a rock, maintaining recognizable form while being composed of completely different elements from moment to moment. This quantum view of selfhood might help explain why personal identity often feels both absolutely certain and mysteriously elusive. You know with complete certainty that you exist and that you've existed continuously throughout your life, yet when you try to pin down exactly what makes you you, the answer becomes surprisingly difficult to articulate. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then your sense of self might be the subjective experience of quantum coherence patterns that bind different aspects of experience into a unified whole. Changes in these patterns might correspond to changes in personality, mood, or sense of identity that occur throughout life. Personal growth and transformation might reflect evolution in the quantum processes underlying consciousness, rather than changes in some fixed, unchanging self. The quantum mirror of self also suggests that your identity might be more interconnected with your environment and other people than you typically realize. If consciousness involves quantum processes that are sensitive to subtle environmental influences, then your sense of self might be partially shaped by factors beyond your individual brain, including social relationships, cultural context, and physical environment. This interconnected view of selfhood doesn't diminish personal responsibility or individual significance, but it does suggest a more humble and relational understanding of human identity. Instead of being isolated islands of consciousness, we might be more like temporary concentrations of quantum processes that are embedded within larger patterns of information and relationship. Take a moment to contemplate your own sense of self as you listen to these ideas. The feeling of being you, of having a continuous identity through time, of being the subject of your experiences. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, this familiar sense of selfhood might be one of the most sophisticated quantum phenomena in the known universe, emerging from processes that connect you to the fundamental structure of reality itself. As we continue our exploration into the quantum foundations of consciousness, we encounter perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all. that the very act of choosing might be fundamentally different from what it feels like from the inside. Recent developments in quantum consciousness research suggest that what we experience as deliberate decision-making might actually be the subjective feeling of quantum processes selecting outcomes according to probabilistic laws we cannot influence. This isn't merely philosophical speculation. Researchers have begun developing experimental protocols that could test whether human decision-making involves genuine quantum effects or simply follows classical neural processes that create the illusion of quantum indeterminacy. The results could fundamentally alter our understanding of what it means to choose, to decide, and to direct the course of our own lives. Consider for a moment the last significant decision you made. Perhaps it was choosing to listen to this video, selecting what to have for dinner, or deciding how to respond to a difficult conversation. From your perspective, you likely experienced a process of weighing options, considering consequences, and ultimately selecting what felt like the best course of action. But what if this entire experience of deliberation was simply the subjective feeling of quantum possibilities resolving into a single outcome according to laws you cannot control? Recent research suggests that this might indeed be the case. Studies using advanced brain imaging techniques have shown that patterns of neural activity can predict certain decisions up to 10 seconds before people report being consciously aware of their choice. But if consciousness emerges from quantum processes, as theories like orchestrated objective reduction suggest, then these neural patterns might themselves be the result of quantum events that occur even earlier in the decision-making process. The implications are profound. If your choices emerge from quantum processes that began unfolding before you became conscious of any decision, then what role does conscious deliberation actually play? You might experience the feeling of weighing options and making choices, but this experience might be more like watching a movie than directing a film. The outcome might already be determined by quantum processes operating below the threshold of awareness. Take a gentle breath here and notice how even this simple instruction reveals the mystery of volition. Did you choose to breathe more deeply, or did the suggestion simply trigger processes that led to a change in your breathing pattern? If quantum consciousness theories are correct, the boundary between conscious choice and automatic response might be far less clear than it usually appears. One of the most puzzling aspects of quantum consciousness research involves the relationship between time and decision-making. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that exist in superposition until they collapse into definite states, then the timeline of decision-making might be far more complex than our subjective experience suggests. In quantum mechanics, events can appear to occur in different orders depending on the observer's reference frame, and quantum systems can exhibit what physicists call retrocausal effects, where future measurements seem to influence past states. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then the decisions you think you're making in the present might be influenced by quantum events that extend both into the past and the future in ways that classical thinking cannot accommodate. Some researchers have speculated that this temporal complexity might explain certain puzzling aspects of human decision-making. Have you ever had the experience of suddenly knowing what you wanted to do without being able to explain how you reached that conclusion, or found yourself making a choice that seemed to emerge from nowhere, fully formed and somehow inevitable? If consciousness involves quantum processes that operate across extended time periods, then these experiences might reflect the collapse of quantum superpositions that have been evolving over much longer timescales than conscious awareness can detect. Your sense of suddenly knowing what to do might be the moment when quantum processes that began much earlier finally resolve into a definite outcome that enters conscious experience. This temporal paradox of decision-making raises profound questions about personal responsibility and moral agency. If your choices emerge from quantum processes that extend across time in ways you cannot perceive or control, then the usual assumptions about moral responsibility might need to be fundamentally reconsidered. The decision you think you made in a particular moment might actually be the culmination of quantum processes that began long before that moment and extend into futures you cannot foresee. Research into quantum consciousness remains highly speculative, and many scientists are skeptical that quantum effects play any significant role in human decision-making. However, the questions these theories raise about the nature of time, choice, and consciousness continue to drive innovative research that pushes the boundaries of our understanding. As you contemplate these temporal paradoxes, notice how your own sense of time seems to flow as you listen. The words you're hearing now were spoken in the past, yet they're creating thoughts and responses in your present awareness. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then even this simple experience of listening might involve quantum events that connect past, present, and future in ways that transcend ordinary temporal boundaries. If consciousness does emerge from quantum processes in brain microtubules, as the orchestrated objective reduction theory proposes, then your mental life might be far more like a musical performance than a computational process. Instead of information being processed sequentially, like data in a computer, consciousness might emerge from the harmonious interaction of countless quantum oscillators vibrating in complex rhythms across multiple frequency ranges. Recent research has identified what appears to be a hierarchy of oscillations in brain microtubules, ranging from terahertz frequencies at the quantum level down to the familiar brain waves measured by EEG. These oscillations seem to be organized in harmonic relationships, much like the overtones that give musical instruments their distinctive timbres. The overall symphony of these quantum vibrations might be what creates the rich, multi-dimensional quality of conscious experience. This orchestral model of consciousness helps explain certain puzzling features of mental life that are difficult to account for using purely classical theories. The way different aspects of experience seem to blend seamlessly together, the capacity for consciousness to hold multiple contradictory ideas simultaneously, and the fluid, dynamic quality of thoughts and feelings might all reflect the harmonic interactions of quantum oscillations operating at different scales. The metaphor also suggests why consciousness seems to have both structure and spontaneity. Like a jazz ensemble that follows certain harmonic rules while leaving room for improvisation, consciousness might emerge from quantum processes that operate constraints, while still allowing for genuine within physical constraints, while still allowing genuine creativity and novelty. Your thoughts might not be completely determined by prior causes, but they might not be entirely random either. Instead, they might emerge from quantum processes that blend structure with spontaneity in ways that create the distinctive texture of conscious experience. Some researchers have suggested that practices like meditation might work by helping to harmonize these quantum oscillations, creating more coherent patterns of vibration that correspond to states of expanded awareness and inner peace. The sense of clarity and unity that many people report during contemplative practices might reflect increased coherence in the quantum orchestra that gives rise to consciousness. This remains a highly speculative idea, and no scientific consensus exists about whether meditation actually influences quantum processes in the brain. However, the orchestral model provides an intriguing framework for understanding how consciousness might emerge from quantum processes while still maintaining the flexibility and creativity that characterize human mental life. Listen for a moment to the quality of your own thoughts as they arise and pass away. Notice how they seem to emerge from somewhere deeper than conscious control, yet feel intimately connected to who you are. If consciousness does emerge from quantum orchestrations, then this familiar process of thinking might be one of the most sophisticated quantum phenomena in the known universe. One of the most intriguing possibilities raised by quantum consciousness theories is that individual minds might not be as isolated from each other as we typically assume. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, and if quantum systems can become entangled across space, then there might be subtle connections between conscious minds that operate below the threshold of ordinary awareness. While there is no scientific evidence for direct mind-to-mind quantum entanglement, some researchers have speculated about whether quantum processes in different brains might occasionally become correlated through mechanisms we don't yet understand. These correlations wouldn't involve telepathic communication or direct thought transmission, but might create subtle influences on mood, creativity, or decision-making that people experience without recognizing their source. Recent studies have investigated whether groups of people in close proximity show coordinated changes in brain activity that cannot be explained by obvious sensory cues or social signals. While the results remain preliminary and controversial, some researchers have found evidence for what they call neural synchrony between individuals during activities like meditation, music making, or intimate conversation. If consciousness does have quantum foundations, then these synchronization effects might reflect quantum correlations that extend beyond individual brains to encompass social groups or communities. The feeling of connection you experience with others might have quantum dimensions that complement the obvious psychological and social factors that bind people together. This social quantum perspective might help explain certain mysterious aspects of collective human behavior. The way emotions seem to spread through crowds, the emergence of collective creativity in groups, or the sense of shared understanding that can develop between people who spend time together might all involve quantum processes that create subtle connections between individual consciousness systems. Some meditation teachers and contemplative practitioners have long reported experiences of expanded awareness that seem to transcend individual boundaries. While these reports are subjective and difficult to study scientifically, they might reflect temporary changes in quantum coherence patterns that allow consciousness to extend beyond its usual limits. It's crucial to emphasize that these ideas remain highly speculative, and most neuroscientists are skeptical that quantum effects play any significant role in social behavior or group consciousness. However, the possibility that consciousness might have social quantum dimensions adds another layer of complexity to our understanding of what it means to be aware in a world filled with other conscious beings. As you listen to these ideas, you might find yourself more aware of the social context in which your consciousness is embedded. The people in your life, the communities you belong to, the cultural influences that have shaped your thinking. If consciousness does have quantum foundations, then your awareness might be more interconnected with others than you typically realize, participating in subtle networks of influence and correlation that operate beneath conscious recognition. If quantum processes do underlie consciousness, This could revolutionize our approach to mental health and psychological healing. Instead of focusing solely on neurotransmitter systems or cognitive patterns, future therapeutic approaches might target the quantum oscillations that some theories suggest give rise to conscious experience itself. Researchers are already exploring whether techniques like transcranial ultrasound might be able to influence microtubule resonances in specific brain regions, potentially helping to restore healthy patterns of quantum coherence in people suffering from depression, anxiety, or other mental health conditions. This approach would represent a fundamentally different paradigm from current psychiatric treatments, working at the quantum level rather than the molecular level. Some studies have investigated whether practices like meditation, yoga, or other contemplative disciplines might help maintain or restore quantum coherence in brain microtubules. The sense of inner peace, clarity, and emotional balance that many people report from these practices might reflect beneficial changes in the quantum processes that underlie consciousness. However, it's essential to emphasize that these ideas remain highly experimental, and no established therapeutic protocols based on quantum consciousness theories currently exist. The research is still in its earliest stages, and many questions remain about whether quantum effects actually play any significant role in mental health or psychological well-being. What makes this area of research particularly intriguing is the possibility that quantum-based approaches might help explain why some therapeutic interventions work when others don't. If mental health conditions involve disruptions in quantum coherence patterns, then treatments that restore healthy quantum oscillations might be more effective than those that only address symptoms at the classical neural level. The quantum perspective on mental health also suggests that healing might be a more holistic process than current medical models recognize. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes that are sensitive to factors like environment, relationships, and lifestyle, then therapeutic approaches might need to address these broader contextual factors rather than focusing solely on brain chemistry or individual psychology. Some researchers have even speculated that the placebo effect, where people experience real improvements in health after receiving inactive treatments, might involve quantum processes that respond to expectation and belief in ways that classical medicine cannot explain. While this remains purely speculative, it illustrates how quantum consciousness theories might eventually transform our understanding of healing and recovery. As you consider these therapeutic possibilities, notice your own relationship to health and well-being. The practices that help you feel more balanced and peaceful, the activities that restore your sense of vitality, the relationships that support your mental health. If consciousness does have quantum foundations, then these beneficial influences might be working at levels far deeper than you typically realize. One of the most fascinating aspects of human consciousness is its capacity for genuine creativity, the ability to generate ideas, solutions, and expressions that seem to emerge from nowhere. If consciousness arises from quantum processes, this creative capacity might reflect something fundamental about the nature of quantum reality itself. In classical physics, creative ideas would ultimately have to emerge from the recombination of existing information according to deterministic rules. But quantum mechanics suggests that genuine novelty might be possible through processes like quantum tunneling, superposition, and collapse, which can produce outcomes that aren't strictly determined by prior conditions. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then creativity might emerge from quantum events that explore multiple possibilities simultaneously before resolving into specific ideas or insights. The experience of suddenly having a creative breakthrough might be the subjective feeling of quantum superpositions collapsing into definite outcomes that contain genuinely new information. This quantum perspective on creativity could help explain why creative insights often seem to emerge during states of relaxed awareness rather than focused concentration. If creativity depends on quantum processes that operate best when classical mental controls are relaxed, then practices that quiet the analytical mind might create optimal conditions for quantum creativity to flourish. Some researchers have investigated whether there are correlations between creative ability and sensitivity to subtle environmental factors that might influence quantum processes in the brain. While the results remain preliminary, some studies suggest that highly creative individuals might be more responsive to factors like electromagnetic fields, atmospheric conditions, or even astronomical events that could potentially influence quantum states. The paradox of quantum creativity is that it suggests our most innovative and original thoughts might arise from processes we cannot consciously control or direct. The ideas you're most proud of, the solutions that seem to emerge from your deepest understanding, might actually be the products of quantum events that operate according to their own mysterious logic. This doesn't diminish the value or significance of human creativity, but it does suggest a more humble and wonder-filled understanding of where new ideas come from. Instead of being the sole authors of our creative works, we might be more like collaborators with quantum processes that generate novelty through mechanisms we're only beginning to understand. Recent research has even suggested that quantum effects might play a role in the structure of language itself, with the meaning of words and sentences emerging from quantum-like interactions between different linguistic elements. If this proves correct, then the very words you're hearing now might be carrying information through quantum processes that transcend classical communication channels. Take a moment to reflect on your own creative experiences, the ideas that have surprised you with their originality, the expressions that seem to appear fully formed, as if they came through you rather than from you. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then these experiences might offer glimpses into the quantum creativity that underlies all conscious experience. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, they will force us to confront fundamental ethical questions about the nature of human agency, moral responsibility, and social justice. If people's actions emerge from quantum processes they cannot consciously control, how do we think about praise and blame, punishment and reward, rights and responsibilities? Some philosophers argue that quantum indeterminacy might actually enhance rather than diminish moral responsibility. If our actions aren't completely determined by prior causes, then we might bear genuine responsibility for influencing the quantum processes that give rise to our behaviour, even if we cannot control those processes directly. This perspective suggests that moral responsibility might be more about creating conditions that favour beneficial quantum outcomes rather than about making specific conscious choices. We might be responsible for practices, environments, and relationships that influence the quantum processes underlying consciousness, even if we're not responsible for the specific outcomes those processes generate. The quantum perspective on ethics also raises questions about how we should respond to harmful behaviour if it emerges from quantum processes beyond conscious control. Traditional approaches to justice focus on punishment and deterrence, but if actions arise from quantum events, these approaches might be less effective than interventions that address the quantum conditions underlying problematic behaviour. Some researchers have suggested that restorative justice approaches, which focus on healing relationships and addressing underlying causes rather than simply punishing wrongdoing, might be more compatible with quantum consciousness theories. If harmful behavior emerges from disruptions in quantum coherence, then therapeutic interventions might be more appropriate than punitive responses. The quantum perspective also has implications for how we think about personal growth and self-improvement. Instead of trying to change behavior through willpower and conscious effort alone, we might need to focus on creating conditions that favor beneficial quantum outcomes through practices like meditation, therapy, education, and community involvement. These ethical implications remain highly speculative, as quantum consciousness theories themselves are not yet established scientific facts. However, they illustrate how discoveries about the nature of consciousness could eventually require us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about human nature and social organization. The possibility that consciousness has quantum foundations also raises questions about the moral status of artificial systems that might eventually be capable of quantum information processing. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then artificial quantum systems might eventually deserve moral consideration in ways that classical computers do not. As you contemplate these ethical implications, consider your own moral intuitions and how they might be affected by different understandings of consciousness and free will. Do your feelings about responsibility, justice, and personal growth change when you imagine that consciousness might emerge from quantum processes beyond direct conscious control? Perhaps the most technically challenging aspect of quantum consciousness research involves developing methods to measure and study quantum processes that might be occurring in living brains. Unlike quantum systems in physics laboratories, which can be isolated and controlled with extraordinary precision, the brain is a warm, wet, noisy environment filled with countless molecular interactions that should theoretically destroy quantum coherence almost instantly. Yet recent experimental advances have begun to detect what appear to be quantum effects in biological systems operating at room temperature. Studies of photosynthesis have revealed quantum coherence that persists long enough to influence the efficiency of energy transfer in plant cells. Similar quantum effects have been detected in bird navigation systems and possibly in the sense of smell. These discoveries suggest that biological systems might have evolved mechanisms for protecting and utilizing quantum processes in ways that overcome the apparent obstacles posed by warm, noisy environments. If consciousness does involve quantum effects, then the brain might employ similar protective mechanisms that allow quantum coherence to persist long enough to influence neural processing. Researchers are developing increasingly sophisticated techniques for detecting quantum signatures in brain tissue. Advanced magnetic resonance imaging systems can now detect extremely subtle changes in brain activity that might reflect quantum processes. Quantum sensors based on diamond defects can measure magnetic fields with sensitivity that approaches the theoretical limits imposed by quantum mechanics itself. Companies like Google and IBM are also exploring whether quantum computers might be used to simulate consciousness or to interface directly with biological neural networks. These hybrid biological quantum systems might offer new ways to study consciousness, while also potentially creating forms of artificial awareness that transcend the capabilities of either biological brains or classical computers alone. The measurement challenges extend beyond technical difficulties to fundamental conceptual problems. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then the act of measuring those processes might inevitably change them, creating an observer effect that complicates any attempt to study consciousness objectively. This measurement paradox might not be a temporary limitation of current technology, but rather a fundamental feature of consciousness research itself. The tools we use to study awareness are themselves products of awareness, creating recursive loops that make complete objectivity impossible in principle. However, this limitation doesn't necessarily impede progress in understanding consciousness. Just as quantum mechanics has proven enormously successful despite the measurement problems that complicate its interpretation, quantum consciousness research might yield practical insights and applications even if complete theoretical understanding remains elusive. Some researchers suggest that the best approach to studying consciousness might involve combining objective measurement with careful attention to subjective experience. The first-person perspective might provide essential information about consciousness that cannot be captured through external observation alone, making contemplative practices and introspective techniques valuable complements to scientific measurement. As you reflect on these measurement challenges, notice your own unique position as both the observer and the observed in consciousness research. You have direct access to conscious experience that no external instrument can fully capture, making your subjective awareness an essential source of data about the nature of consciousness itself. If consciousness does emerge from quantum processes, this places human awareness within a much larger cosmic context than we typically consider. Quantum mechanics reveals that the universe is fundamentally interconnected through phenomena like entanglement and non-locality, suggesting that consciousness might be participating in cosmic scale processes that extend far beyond individual brains. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics suggest that consciousness might play a fundamental role in the structure of reality itself. If observation is necessary to collapse quantum wave functions into definite states, and if consciousness is inherently observational, then awareness might be woven into the basic fabric of the universe rather than being a late addition that emerged through biological evolution. This cosmic perspective on consciousness doesn't necessarily imply mystical or supernatural explanations for awareness. Instead, it suggests that consciousness might be a natural expression of quantum processes that operate throughout the universe at all scales, from subatomic particles to galactic structures. Recent research in cosmology has revealed that the universe appears to be structured in ways that allow for the evolution of complexity and information processing. The fundamental constants of physics, the properties of matter and energy, and the large-scale structure of space-time all seem to be precisely tuned to allow for the emergence of stars, planets, and eventually life and consciousness. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, then the cosmic evolution that led to awareness might represent the universe developing the capacity to observe and understand itself. Through conscious beings like ourselves, the cosmos might be engaging in a kind of cosmic self-reflection that represents a fundamental phase transition in the evolution of reality. This perspective suggests that the questions we're exploring about consciousness and quantum mechanics aren't merely academic exercises, but participate in the universe's ongoing process of self-discovery. Our investigation of awareness might be one of the ways that cosmic evolution continues to unfold, with consciousness serving as the universe's method for understanding its own deepest nature. The cosmic context also places individual human consciousness within a much larger temporal framework. If awareness emerges from quantum processes that connect us to the fundamental structure of reality, then your consciousness might be participating in processes that began with the Big Bang and will continue until the ultimate fate of the universe unfolds. Some researchers have even speculated about whether consciousness might survive the heat death of the universe through quantum processes that transcend ordinary thermodynamic limits. While such ideas remain highly speculative, they illustrate how quantum consciousness theories might eventually transform our understanding of life, death, and cosmic destiny. As you contemplate your place within this cosmic context, consider that the awareness you're experiencing right now might be one of the most remarkable phenomena in the known universe. The capacity for matter to organize itself into patterns capable of self-reflection and cosmic contemplation might represent the leading edge of cosmic evolution itself. As quantum consciousness research continues to develop, one of the greatest challenges will be integrating these new understandings with existing knowledge about the brain, mind, and behavior. If consciousness does involve quantum processes, these effects would need to work alongside the classical neural mechanisms that neuroscience has already identified and studied extensively. This integration challenge is both technical and conceptual. On the technical side, researchers need to understand how quantum effects in microtubules might influence classical neural processes like synaptic transmission, neural oscillations, and network dynamics. The quantum and classical levels of brain function would need to interact in ways that create the unified phenomenon we experience as consciousness. On the conceptual side, quantum consciousness theories would need to account for everything we already know about how brain damage, neurotransmitter imbalances, and other classical factors affect conscious experience. Any complete theory of consciousness would need to explain both quantum and classical contributions to awareness in a coherent, unified framework. Some researchers have proposed that consciousness might emerge from the interaction between quantum processes in microtubules and classical processes in neural networks, with each level contributing different aspects of conscious experience. Quantum processes might provide the unified, coherent quality of awareness, while classical processes might determine specific content like memories, perceptions, and thoughts. This multi-level approach could help explain why consciousness has both unified and fragmented aspects. Your sense of being a single, continuous self might emerge from quantum coherence, while the diversity of your thoughts, feelings, and experiences might reflect classical neural processes that operate within the unified quantum framework. The integration challenge also extends to understanding how consciousness relates to other aspects of human psychology that have been studied extensively, such as learning, memory, emotion, and social behavior. If consciousness has quantum foundations, these psychological processes might also involve quantum effects that complement their classical neural mechanisms. Recent research has begun investigating whether quantum effects might play a role in memory formation and retrieval, emotional processing, and decision-making. While the results remain preliminary, some studies suggest that quantum coherence might influence how information is stored and accessed in the brain, potentially explaining aspects of memory and cognition that are difficult to account for using purely classical models. The integration challenge is complicated by the fact that quantum consciousness theories remain highly speculative, with limited experimental evidence and no scientific consensus about their validity. Researchers must balance openness to revolutionary possibilities with appropriate skepticism about claims that haven't been rigorously tested. As you consider these integration challenges, reflect on your own experience of consciousness and how it might emerge from the complex interplay of quantum and classical processes. The seamless unity of your awareness might conceal incredibly sophisticated mechanisms that operate across multiple scales of organization, from quantum to molecular to cellular to neural network levels. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, they might reveal previously unknown potentials for human development and enhancement. Instead of viewing consciousness as a fixed property determined by genetics and brain structure, we might discover that awareness can be expanded and refined through practices that influence the quantum processes underlying conscious experience. Some researchers have speculated that advanced meditation practitioners might have learned to consciously influence quantum coherence patterns in their brains, creating states of expanded awareness that transcend ordinary limitations of individual consciousness. The reports of heightened perception, enhanced creativity, and profound states of unity that contemplative traditions describe might reflect genuine changes in quantum processing rather than simply altered brain chemistry. Future technologies might also offer new ways to enhance consciousness through quantum means. Brain-computer interfaces that can detect and influence quantum states in neural tissue might eventually allow for direct enhancement of cognitive abilities, emotional balance, and creative capacity. These technologies could represent a new frontier in human development that transcends the limitations of classical neural modification. However, such possibilities also raise profound ethical questions about the nature of human identity and the desirability of consciousness enhancement. If quantum technologies could alter the fundamental processes underlying awareness, we would need to carefully consider the implications for personal identity, social equality, and human dignity. The potential for consciousness enhancement through quantum means might also reveal that human potential is far greater than we currently realize. If consciousness is limited not by fixed neural constraints, but by quantum coherence patterns that can be modified through practice or technology, then the boundaries of human capability might be more flexible than we imagine. Some researchers have even speculated about whether quantum consciousness might eventually allow for forms of communication or connection between minds that transcend ordinary sensory channels. While such ideas remain purely speculative, they illustrate how quantum theories of consciousness might eventually transform our understanding of what it means to be human. The exploration of human potential through quantum consciousness research also raises questions about the relationship between individual development and collective human evolution. If quantum consciousness theories prove correct, they might reveal previously unknown potentials for human development and enhancement. Instead of viewing consciousness as a fixed property determined by genetics and brain structure, we might discover that awareness can be expanded and refined through practices that influence the quantum processes underlying conscious experience. Some researchers have speculated that advanced meditation practitioners might have learned to consciously influence quantum coherence patterns in their brains, creating states of expanded awareness that transcend ordinary limitations of individual consciousness. The reports of heightened perception, enhanced creativity, and profound states of unity that contemplative traditions describe might reflect genuine changes in quantum processing rather than simply altered brain chemistry. Future technologies might also offer new ways to enhance consciousness through quantum means. Brain-computer interfaces that can detect and influence quantum states in neural tissue might eventually allow for direct enhancement of cognitive abilities, emotional balance, and creative capacity. These technologies could represent a new frontier in human development that transcends the limitations of classical neural modification. However, such possibilities also raise profound ethical questions about the nature of human identity and the desirability of consciousness enhancement. If quantum technologies could alter the fundamental processes underlying awareness, we would need to carefully consider the implications for personal identity, social equality, and human dignity. The potential for consciousness enhancement through quantum means might also reveal that human potential is far greater than we currently realize. If consciousness is limited not by fixed neural constraints, but by quantum coherence patterns that can be modified through practice or technology, then the boundaries of human capability might be more flexible than we imagine. Some researchers have even speculated about whether quantum consciousness might eventually allow for forms of communication or connection between minds that transcend ordinary sensory channels. While such ideas remain purely speculative, they illustrate how quantum theories of consciousness might eventually transform our understanding of what it means to be human. The exploration of human potential through quantum consciousness research also raises questions about the relationship between individual development and collective human evolution. If consciousness has quantum foundations that connect individual minds to broader patterns of cosmic information processing, then personal growth might contribute to the evolution of human consciousness as a whole. This collective dimension of consciousness development suggests that the practices and discoveries that enhance individual awareness might also benefit humanity's overall capacity for wisdom, creativity, and understanding. The meditation you practice, the insights you gain, the moments of expanded awareness you experience might contribute to a larger process of human awakening that extends far beyond your personal development. As you contemplate these future possibilities, consider how they might apply to your own journey of growth and discovery. If consciousness does have quantum foundations, then your capacity for awareness, creativity, and connection might be far greater than you currently realize, waiting to be unlocked through practices and understandings that we're only beginning to explore. This paradox doesn't diminish the value of our inquiry, but rather deepens its significance. The questions we've explored about consciousness, choice, and control emerge from the same quantum processes they seek to understand. We are consciousness investigating consciousness, awareness studying awareness, potentially quantum systems contemplating their own quantum nature. The implications of this recursive investigation extend far beyond academic philosophy or scientific curiosity. If our sense of being in control is indeed an illusion created by quantum processes, this doesn't necessarily make life meaningless or actions irrelevant. Instead, it might reveal a more humble and interconnected understanding of human existence that emphasizes participation over domination, influence over control, and wisdom over willpower. The quantum perspective on consciousness suggests that we might be more like musicians in a cosmic orchestra than directors of our own private symphonies. We contribute to the music through our presence and participation, but we don't control the broader harmonies that emerge from the collective performance. Our individual notes matter precisely because they're part of something larger than ourselves. This understanding might actually be more liberating than threatening. If your sense of constant responsibility for controlling your thoughts, emotions, and circumstances is partially illusory, then you might be able to relax into a more natural relationship with the flow of conscious experience. Instead of fighting to control processes that may be fundamentally beyond your direct influence, you might learn to work with the quantum currents of consciousness in ways that feel more effortless and sustainable. The paradox also suggests that the development of wisdom and understanding might be less about gaining control and more about learning to recognize and respond skillfully to the quantum processes that give rise to conscious experience. Instead of trying to force specific outcomes through willpower, you might focus on creating conditions that favor beneficial quantum possibilities. This doesn't mean becoming passive or fatalistic, but rather developing a more sophisticated understanding of how consciousness actually works and how you can most effectively participate in its unfolding. If consciousness emerges from quantum processes, then wisdom might involve learning to dance with quantum uncertainty, rather than trying to impose classical certainty on fundamentally probabilistic systems. As you reflect on this paradox of control, notice how it feels to consider that your sense of agency might be both real and illusory simultaneously. Real in the sense that you genuinely experience choice and influence outcomes through your actions, but illusory in the sense that these experiences might emerge from quantum processes operating according to their own deeper logic. Despite all the theories, experiments, and speculations we've explored, consciousness remains one of the deepest mysteries in science and philosophy. Each new discovery seems to reveal additional layers of complexity rather than providing final answers. The quantum perspective on consciousness opens up fascinating possibilities, but it also introduces new questions that may be even more profound than the ones it attempts to resolve. This ongoing mystery isn't a failure of scientific understanding, but rather a reflection of the extraordinary nature of consciousness itself. The fact that matter can organize itself into patterns capable of self-awareness, subjective experience, and cosmic contemplation might be the most remarkable phenomenon in the known universe. The questions we've explored tonight touch the very heart of what it means to exist as conscious beings in a quantum reality. The mystery extends to our own role as conscious observers investigating consciousness. We cannot step outside of awareness to study it objectively, making consciousness perhaps the most challenging subject in all of science. Yet this limitation might also be a source of insight, revealing that consciousness and reality might be more intimately connected than classical science assumed. As research continues and new experimental results emerge, our understanding of consciousness will undoubtedly continue to evolve. The quantum theories we've explored might prove correct, partially correct, or completely wrong. New paradigms that we haven't yet imagined might emerge to replace current models. The history of science suggests that our current understanding, however sophisticated, is likely just one step in an ongoing journey of discovery. What remains constant through all these changes is the fundamental mystery of subjective experience itself. No matter how much we learn about the neural correlates of consciousness, the quantum processes that might underlie awareness, or the evolutionary history of mind, the basic fact of being conscious continues to inspire wonder and investigation. This sense of ongoing mystery might be essential to consciousness itself. Perhaps awareness is not a problem to be solved, but an invitation to ongoing exploration and discovery. The questions we've examined tonight don't need final answers to enrich our understanding and deepen our appreciation for the extraordinary nature of conscious existence. The quantum perspective on consciousness reminds us that reality at its deepest level is characterized more by mystery than certainty, more by possibility than fixed determination. Living consciously in such a reality might require us to become comfortable with not knowing, to find peace with uncertainty, and to embrace the ongoing adventure of discovery that consciousness makes possible. As you continue your own exploration of these questions, remember that you're participating in one of humanity's greatest adventures, the quest to understand the nature of mind and reality. Whether consciousness emerges from quantum processes, classical neural computation, or something else entirely, the investigation itself reveals the remarkable capacity of conscious beings to contemplate their own existence and place in the cosmos. Take a moment to appreciate the simple miracle of being aware right now, the thoughts flowing through your mind, the sensations in your body, the sense of being present in this moment of exploration and discovery. Whatever the ultimate nature of consciousness turns out to be, the experience of being aware remains one of the most precious and mysterious gifts of existence. The questions we've explored together tonight represent just the beginning of what may be a revolutionary transformation in our understanding of consciousness, choice, and human nature. As research continues and new discoveries emerge, we may find ourselves living in a reality that's far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. Whether or not quantum consciousness theories prove correct, they've already expanded our sense of what might be possible. They've challenged us to question assumptions we never thought to question, to consider possibilities we never thought to consider, and to approach the mystery of consciousness with both rigorous scientific thinking and genuine wonder. As we reach the final moments of our exploration into quantum consciousness and the illusion of control, we encounter perhaps the most profound question of all. What does it mean to be human if our sense of agency is fundamentally different from what we experience? The theories we've examined suggest that the boundary between self and universe, between observer and observed, might be far more fluid than we ever imagined. If consciousness does emerge from quantum processes that connect us to the fundamental fabric of reality, then every moment of awareness might be a kind of cosmic collaboration. Your thoughts, decisions, and sense of personal identity might arise from quantum events that link you to processes extending far beyond the boundaries of your individual brain. This doesn't diminish your significance, but rather places you within a far grander context than classical theories of mind ever suggested. Whether consciousness emerges from quantum processes orchestrating themselves into awareness, or from classical neural networks computing their way to thought, the questions themselves reveal something extraordinary about our place in the universe. We are patterns of matter that have somehow learned to wonder about their own existence, quantum or otherwise. The theories we've explored tonight remain unproven, speculative ideas rather than established scientific facts. Yet they invite us into a more humble relationship with the mystery of being conscious. Perhaps our sense of control is neither completely real nor entirely illusory, but something more nuanced, a dance between genuine influence and graceful surrender to processes larger than our individual will. As you drift towards sleep tonight, carrying these questions with you into dreams, remember that the capacity to contemplate consciousness might itself be the most remarkable phenomenon we've encountered. Whether your thoughts arise from quantum orchestras or classical computations, they represent the universe reflecting upon itself through you. If you found this exploration of quantum consciousness and the illusion of control as fascinating as I did, you might be equally intrigued by our investigation into how the James Webb Space Telescope just detected something older than the Big Bang and how it breaks physics. This discovery challenges our fundamental understanding of time and cosmic evolution in ways that echo the consciousness puzzles we've been exploring, revealing that mystery and wonder extend from the quantum realm of the mind to the cosmic scales of space and time themselves. Until our next journey into the beautiful mysteries that surround and constitute us, remember that the very capacity to contemplate these questions about consciousness and control might be the most extraordinary quantum phenomenon of all. In a universe governed by uncertainty principles and probabilistic laws, the emergence of beings capable of questioning their own nature represents a kind of cosmic awakening that continues to unfold through investigations, like the one we've shared tonight. Sleep well, dream deeply, and remember that whether your choices are truly your own or emerge from quantum processes beyond your control, the experience of being conscious in a quantum universe remains an invitation to wonder, exploration, and the ongoing adventure of understanding what it means to exist.